We will begin. I am Christian Latta, Secretary Treasurer of the Board and Master of Ceremonies today, which I'm very much enjoying, if you can't tell. Welcome to our September 20th, 2024 CBA meeting.
So before we begin, you need to unmute your mics when you want to talk, but don't pull them forward. They're actually pretty sensitive and they get caught up in static. So unlike ours at the office, these ones you want to keep further back. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, so the CBA has provided the opportunity for the public to participate via the WebEx platform. When we take public comments, we will begin by taking public comment from those individuals attending the meeting here at the San Marcos location. I will then ask the moderator to open up the lines for public comment. You will be allotted up to 5 minutes for public comment. Ms. Reed, can you please establish quorum?
Doug Aguilera.
Present.
Patricia Batchelor. Here. Nancy Corrigan. Present. Nancy Dong.
Present.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines. Christian Latta.
Present.
Tony Lynn.
Here.
Katrina Salazar. Present. Teresa Thompson.
Present.
And Evangeline Ward. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Okay, so that has us at our agenda item number 5 that we are picking up on, and that is for public comments for items not on the agenda. Are there any public comments here in San Marcos for items not on the agenda?
Okay, it was my song. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning. I'm here to address the topic, the concept of employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs, as a mechanism for succession and sustainability in public accounting firms. My name is Kevin Long. I'm the president of the Employee Benefits Law Group. We are a law and consulting firm with offices around the state. And ESOPs are the predominant area of our practice. I've been in the ESOP field for 37 years. And when I worked on my first ESOP in 1987 at Arthur Anderson Company in San Francisco on an Amber monitor running Lotus 123 on an IBM XT, ESOPs had just come into the modern age with the addition of some tax incentives, in particular Code Section 1042, which allows shareholders to sell their stock to ESOPs and defer capital gain. And at that time, were used largely as a tax device and were used in bootstrap management, leverage buyouts, and that was the beginning of some of the negative myths that perpetuate to today. Roll forward 40 years, and that September is the 40th anniversary of that 1042 code section. We have other amazing advantages in ESOPs, and that is the ability for a corporation to become partially or 100% tax-free, free from federal income taxes and state income taxes, which provides an over 30% working capital advantage. I'm known to create a little bit of static. We have additional advantages for subsidized corporations, as I said, the potential for becoming tax-free, which provides a working capital advantage to support the corporation and its operations, but to also pay benefits. And if you look at these tax advantages, Uncle Sam will pay for 50 to 70% of the entire cost of succession in a corporation. And I believe the CPA firms deserve that same opportunity. I believe the Business and Professions Code, as it is currently written, supports that. And you have a practice area, you have a profession that is largely hierarchical traditionally, and we believe that broader base of certified public accountants in their firms should have an interest in ownership and in a say in how those businesses, how those firms are run. Employee ownership, as it's matured over the years, has become truly a broad-based employee ownership phenomenon in this country. And those myths that began in 1984 are constantly being fought. we're trying to put them out of business when the time has come for ESOPs to be fully into their own. And Congress has been proactive in this regard and has instituted various anti-abuse rules and whatnot to make sure that they are broad-based ownership programs. Interestingly, by analogy, until 2018, professional service firms were the largest segment of the ESOP community. They were only recently surpassed by construction in 2019, but it shows that licensed engineers and other consulting firms understand that in order for them to overcome the generational barrier of moving ownership in their professional firms, ESOPs are an integral part of that process. And some of the most successful engineering firms in the country are ESOP companies. So, in the near future, we're going to be submitting an application on behalf of several of our public accounting firm clients to get a license to practice for their corporations for broad-based ownership. ESOPs, you probably have heard about in the marketplace from consulting firms and whatnot. And what they are promoting and what they are selling are pretty much cookie-cutter plans that are once again aimed at tax advantages. They're aimed at succession, but they're largely template-driven for the types of transactions they do. An ESOP is very malleable, and we can tailor it to meet the requirements of the Business and Professions Code. And I'm asking the board to consider it and work through it because I think it can be a significant change for accounting firms in California. Thanks for hearing me.
Thank you so much for your comments today. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda online on WebEx?
This is the moderator. If anyone on WebEx would like to make a comment on items that are not on the agenda, you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, or you may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box, and then click send. Each speaker will have 5 minutes with a 30-second warning. Any comments for items not on the agenda? And call-in users may press *3 to raise their hands. And I am not seeing any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, report of the president. I will start with an introduction to our Dean of College of Business Administration here at CSU San Marcos, Mr. Ronald Ramirez. He received his PhD in Management Information Systems from the University of California, Irvine. He began his academic career at the University of Colorado, Denver, where he served as faculty and in numerous leadership roles for nearly 20 years. His research interests sit at the intersection of information systems, organizations, innovation, and strategy. He has published research articles in Information Systems Research Journal, Journal of Management Information Systems, Information Systems Journal, Information and Management, Productions, Operations Management, and others. Dr. Ramirez is a co-PI on National Science Foundation grant awards and has sat on NSF proposal review panels. Ron also holds an MBA in finance from USC's Marshall School of Business and a BS in electrical engineering from Fresno State. Prior to his PhD, Ron worked professionally in telecommunications, semiconductor, and oil industries. Welcome, Mr. Ramirez. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, so thank you. I'm Ron Ramirez. I'm the Dean of the College of Business Administration here at Cal State San Marcos. I'm here to officially welcome you to the campus. I'd like to thank you for holding this meeting here at the university. These partnerships are essential for our students and their educational pathway here at the university. Cal State San Marcos, under the leadership of President Ellen Neufeld, has established a mission of student success. We're the third youngest Cal State campus of the 23 Cal State campus system. We've recently just crossed the threshold of 17,000 students. And we think that's a reflection of our mission on student success. Our student population that attends this university is 50% diverse and over 50% first generation. Last spring, for instance, approximately 58% of the students who graduated were first in their families to earn a four-year degree. And we focus our education programs on not only conceptual knowledge, but also to provide experiential learning, hands-on experiences that students can earn while they're in the degree program so they can be career ready upon graduation. And in the College of Business, which is one of 4 colleges here at the university, we focus on career readiness from the start in a Business 101 Introduction to Business course, to business professionalism, and then a senior experience capstone course, where teams of 5 students provide work on real-world projects for organizations around the community, both businesses and nonprofits. Last spring, for instance, we completed approximately 60 projects for local organizations, over half of which were nonprofits. And this type of community service is a cornerstone of our AACSB accredited business program here at the university. Accounting is one of 9 options students can choose when they study business here at the college. I just learned from a couple partners of Moss Adams last night that there is quite a workforce shortage in accounting. Like other universities around the nation, we have trouble finding students who want to study to become accountants. And so we welcome any ideas or partnerships you may want to start to help improve the pipeline of future accountants that want to study accounting and go into the profession. We're launching, for instance, next summer, a partnership with the National Association of Black Accountants to hold their San Diego Regional High School program here in San Marcos next summer, 2025. So any programs like that, we're welcome with participation and partnership. So with that, I'd like to say thank you once again for holding the meeting here on the campus, and a special thanks to Dr. Alan Stiles for spearheading this event here for us at the university. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ramirez. Do I have any comments or questions from the board on this item? Seeing none, any public comments here in San Marcos for Dr. Ramirez? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment.
This is the moderator. Instructions are on the screen. If anyone would like to make a comment on the president's remarks, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our calling users may press *3 to raise their hand. Any comments for the president? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
We do have a subsequent board comment. Mr. Aguilera?
Yeah, Mr. Ramirez, thank you for hosting us. And I just wanted to share our experience, my experience yesterday with the students and with the faculty. So there was a very large turnout of students that we got a chance to interact with and talk to. And then during the presentation about the process for obtaining a license, including what education you need and what experience, they were very engaged, and it was a great group, an impressive group of students. And I know personally, I really enjoyed interacting with all the students here.
Great, thank you very much. You know, one thing that the Moss Adams partner said yesterday is they enjoy working with our graduates and they hope to hire them, of course. One of the characteristics besides their knowledge of accounting is that our students are very mature, they have a strong work ethic, and they're very resilient. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional board comments? Okay, I'll have to take public comment once again here in San Marcos since we had a subsequent board comment. Seeing none, moderator, please open Q&A for public comment one more time on this agenda item.
And this is the moderator. If anyone would like to make another public comment or make a public comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
So we can now continue on to agenda item 6B, discussion of the process for annual officer elections. At its November meeting, the CBA will elect a president, vice president, and secretary treasurer. The president, vice president, and secretary treasurer serve one-year terms and may not serve more than 2 consecutive terms. CBA members who wish to be considered for a leadership position should submit a statement of qualifications to Rebecca Reed, Board Relations Analyst, by October 7th, 2024. Do I have any board questions or comments about that process? Seeing none, any public comments here in San Marcos on this agenda item? Seeing none, moderator, please open Q&A for public comment.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a public comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 5 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments? I do not see any comments. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Continuing on to agenda item 6C, we have a presentation from DCA's Office of Human Resources regarding the annual executive officer evaluation. Included in the meeting materials was a flow chart regarding the executive officer annual performance appraisal process. I would like to welcome Olivia Trejo, Chief of Office of Human Resources, and Catherine Bachillier, Staff Services Manager 1, who will be providing the presentation via WebEx.
Morning. My name is Catherine Bachillier, and I am the Appointments and Recruitment Specialist at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Today, I understand the board will hold its annual performance appraisal in November, and today I will be going over the process. Soon, I will be emailing the performance appraisal form to all board members. Once you receive the appraisal, each board member completes the appraisal form independently and retains their own ratings and notes. Please do not forward your completed appraisal form to other members. Please complete your evaluation prior to the board meeting and be ready to discuss and share during closed session at the November meeting. I will obtain input and feedback from DCA's executive personnel on the executive officer's performance. Their feedback will be shared with the board president chair before the board meeting and with board members at the board meeting. At the board meeting in a closed session, board members discuss their individual evaluations and determine the collective ratings from the entire board. Please send a copy of your evaluation with your comments to the board president. All board members' ratings and feedback will be consolidated into one final performance appraisal form. The board president chair will meet separately with the executive officer post-closed session to discuss their performance and board's input. The board president chair will provide the executive officer the final performance appraisal form. The board president chair and the executive officer sign the performance appraisal form, and the executive officer keeps a copy and sends the original to OHR. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Bachillier, for that presentation. Do I have any board questions or comments? Seeing none, any public comment here in San Marcos? Seeing none, moderator, please open public comment on WebEx for this agenda item.
This is the moderator. We've opened the access to public comment. If anyone has a comment, you may click on the hand icon to raise your hand. You may click on the question mark icon, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our calling users may press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 5 minutes with a 30-second warning. And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Continuing on to agenda item 6D, information on licensure experience requirement. We have only a written report for this agenda item. So I just want to ask our board members, did you have any comments or questions regarding this written report? Seeing none, any public comment here in San Marcos for agenda item 6D? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment on agenda item 6D.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a public comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hands. Are there any comments? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Continuing on, our agenda item 6E, discussion on the California Board of Accountancy Sunset Review. We have no report on this agenda item, so we'll continue on to item F, which is our update on legislation the California Board of Accountancy has taken on a position or is monitoring. And we have David Hemphill here for that presentation, our Information and Planning Officer.
Good morning, Ms. Lata. Members of the board, I am David Hemphill. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide an overview of bills on which the CBA either took a position on, monitored during this legislative session. The bill we've been focused on mainly this session is, of course, Assembly Bill 3251, which is the CBA's sunset review legislation, which the CBA took a support position on. AB 3251 would extend the CBA's sunset date from January 1st, 2025 until January 1st, 2029, and also contains several provisions requested by the CBA to help improve operations or to eliminate outdated language, which we've detailed in past meetings. The legislation was passed by both houses and is currently on the governor's desk awaiting his signature. The CBA submitted a request for signature letter to the governor's office on August 30th. I would also like to thank the California Society of CPAs for their letter of support for AB 3251 sent to the governor's office as well. There is only one bill left from the CBA's monitored legislation list that has survived the session, and that is Senate Bill 896, which is the Generative Artificial Intelligence Act. It is also currently on the governor's desk. All the other bills from our monitored list, there were 3 others, they all failed to meet legislative deadlines. The governor has until September 30th to sign or veto all bills that were passed by the legislature in this session. That concludes my presentation, and I will now hand it back over to Ms. Lata.
Thank you, Mr. Hemphill. Do we have any board comments or questions regarding item 6F? Seeing none, any public comment here in San Marcos for item 6F? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment for agenda item 6F.
Thank you. If attendees on WebEx would like to make a comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box, and then click send. And if you are a call-in user, you may press *3 to raise your hand. Are there any comments? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment features?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Continuing on to agenda item 6G, Department of Consumer Affairs Director's Report on Departmental Activities. We have Judy Bucciarelli, Manager, Board and Bureau Relations, and Department of Consumer Affairs via WebEx for this presentation.
And Judy, I sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Good morning. My name is Judy Bucciarelli from the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to join you today. On behalf of the department, I would like to thank the board members for their service and dedication to protect the consumers of California. I have a brief update this morning with 3 items that I'll be presenting. The first is an update on Budget Letter 2420 as it relates to vacancy savings and position elimination. Work continues to address the state's budget deficit. At the end of July, the Department of Finance issued Budget Letter 2420 that outlines the assumed reduction of state's workforce by 10,000 vacancies and $1.5 billion. The Department of Finance estimated a target reduction for each state department by reviewing the department's vacancies and then assuming half of the savings from those vacant positions. DCA worked closely with agency and each board and bureau to provide detailed notes, requested exclusions, and justifications position by position. DCA submitted a proposed vacancy reduction plan to the Department of Finance in mid-August and is awaiting its approval. Next, I have an update on Budget Letter 2424 as it relates to government efficiencies reductions. Additionally, on August 16, 2024, the Department of Finance issued Budget Letter 2424, which outlines the reduction of state departmental budgets by 7.95% in order to achieve state savings of $2.1 billion in 24-25 and future fiscal years. DCA is identifying fixed cost exemptions that cannot be reduced, such as Office of the Attorney General and the Office of Administrative Hearings, so they can be excluded from consideration. The final budget reduction plan will be submitted to agency and the Department of Finance for approval later this month. DCA's budget office continues to work closely with each board and bureau on these reduction requests while always balancing our mission of consumer protection. These are challenging budget exercises, and the department would like to acknowledge board and bureau leaders for their thoughtful and diligent efforts, often under very quick deadlines. DCA will continue to share updates from the Department of Finance as they are received. As a reminder, DCA boards and bureaus must continue to scrutinize expenditures and maximize cost savings, only authorizing expenditures that are mission critical and essential to operations and public services. And finally, I have an innovation spotlight. DCA is very proud to share that on August 20th, 2024, Jason Piccioni, DCA's Deputy Director for the Office of Information Services, was honored for developing DCA's Federal Professional License Portability and State Registration Portal. Jason received the Best of California Award in the Innovation Serving the Public category at the 2024 California Government Innovation Summit. Launched last fall, DCA boards and bureaus have accepted over 176 individuals to practice in California through this online portal. DCA did not receive any additional funding or staffing for its implementation and has worked hard to ensure it is efficiently serving military services members and their spouses relocating to California. The online portal Jason designed and implemented has been used by the U.S. Department of Defense as a model for other states. This concludes my report today. Again, thank you for the opportunity to join you. And at this time, I will turn it back to Member Lotta, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Bucciarelli. Board members, do you have any questions or comments for this agenda item? Seeing none, do we have any public comments here in San Marcos? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment on agenda item 6G.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a public comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment in the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 5 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on the DCA update? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment features?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to today's big item, agenda item 6H. Discussion and possible action on activities and initiatives in California and nationally related to the CPA pipeline, requirements for CPA licensure, CPA mobility, and changes to the Uniform Accountancy Act. We will kick this item off by turning over to Mr. Dominic Franzella to give some opening remarks about this item.
Thank you, Ms. Lattis. So I wanted to provide just a few remarks before Michelle and Deanne do their respective presentations on the legislative proposals and the legislative process and messaging. So as members have probably seen over the past few days, you've likely received some emails from the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, or NASBA, first sometime last week regarding an exposure draft on the competency-based licensure framework, previously called, I believe back in May, the Structural Professional Program. By July, it was the Professional and Experience Program. I think they've settled on this name now as the competency-based framework, but that's those iterative things that you were hearing over the past couple of meetings. And then the second one you probably received yesterday morning as you were walking into the meeting on some remarks NASBA provided regarding possible changes to mobility and mobility provisions that states may be considering. So as it pertains to the mobility remarks that NASBA shared yesterday, while I've heard through the rumor mill that there may have been something coming related to these remarks, I just want to assure members I hadn't received any advance notice from NASBA on this or been contacted to discuss California's specific proposal on the CBA's mobility provisions. And I'd also been in contact with other states or other stakeholders, and while they had also heard this rumor mill, they had not been contacted by NASBA either and consulted about the remarks that might be forthcoming that you saw yesterday. So as we've only had about 24 hours to have those remarks before us, staff have had little chance to review those. But I think one thing that members should be considering as you look at those remarks is that NASBA isn't the board's legal counsel, even though it includes a number of legal citations that are included in the message. And some of the information that's discussed or that raises concerns about the board giving away some forms of delegation as it relates to individuals practicing in the state, I don't really believe are the case for California. So for example, in our proposal, and I think Michelle will touch on it again, individuals' practice rights from a particular state that the board can make a determination violate the board's duty of consumer protection and protecting the public. The board can take action pretty immediately at a board meeting to restrict the no notice, no fee mobility program for licensees from that state. So, and as it relates to the exposure draft on the competency-based experience framework that came out last week, this is only kind of the first part of possible changes to the Uniform Accountancy Act being considered nationally. The actual language that would kind of enact those that competency framework or have it embedded in the what the UAA would have regarding licensure, substantial equivalency. Hasn't been exposed yet. It's my understanding that that might be forthcoming in the next week or two. But we don't know how that's integrated into it at this point. Staff are looking at that exposure draft, but are not really expending a ton of time going into the details just yet. I mean, I know Michelle's team is, but there's others who are kind of just looking at it, waiting for the UAA language to come out so we can understand how that interplays kind of in a bigger picture. So Deanne will be highlighting in her item, staff will be asking members to authorize the president to work with staff to coordinate an interim meeting to discuss, at the time, it was going to be the competency-based framework and then potentially the UAA mobility or the UAA changes and the UAA draft language, but also we'll now kind of incorporate this mobility discussion as well so that we can have a coordinated response if the board wants or how the board wants to respond to these particular documents. But I'd like to note, and I believe Michelle, again, will make some similar comments in her presentation. At this point, there's nothing that has been shared by NASBA that changes staff's opinion on the proposals before you today. Michelle and her team did an excellent job in working with the board's legal counsel and preparing the proposals that effectuate the direction the board laid out back in July at its meeting. For the licensure proposal, which she'll cover here in a minute, or second, I guess, in the order, the statute does create an additional pathway around a baccalaureate degree, just as the board had asked, and provides the board with significant flexibility to enhance the experience model at some point. It lets the CBA continue to evaluate models that are being discussed nationally, and that may continue to be evolving and being discussed nationally as those continue to get fleshed out. And the team was really strategic in making sure that the CBA maintained this flexibility to address experience when we were looking at developing that proposal on licensure. We were making a bigger box so that it was clear what we're trying to do, but doesn't create the rigidity in the statute that lays out very specific information so the board has this time to evaluate and make informed decisions on enhanced experience. And as for mobility, in the proposal, you'll consider the CBA's present mobility program has several consumer protection safeguards that were intentional, that exist today, that'll continue to exist in the new, any enhancements that we're doing to modernize mobility. And again, as I mentioned, the board continues to have that ability to make determinations if a particular state kind of, as the terms that are often used, goes off the rails and does something that really could jeopardize the consumer protection and public protection the board is entrusted to perform. The board is in a position to make some immediate changes if necessary to the mobility for those licensees from that state. So kind of in closing, staff believe the board should feel comfortable in making decisions today on the proposals you have before you. As with any proposal, it's an iterative process. What you do today, we think is really good and we think is sound, but people will have comments. There will probably be changes through the legislative process, but the core of the proposals are a very sound proposal for the board to feel comfortable in approving. And by doing so today, it really sets up a really strong foundation for being as successful as we can in the legislative process, because staff will then be in a position to go to the legislatures themselves, to their staff, work with stakeholders to shepherd this proposal as best we can through that process. If we were to wait till November, by that time, legislators may have already selected a number of bills that they're considering, and we may have a harder time finding that. As we did with the fee a while ago, we picked that up in November and January, and by the time we got into the process, there really wasn't an author to be found. We worked well with DCA to find a way into an omnibus bill, but it was very challenging to try to find an author. So by doing work today, it sets up a better foundation for the success of the bill going forward. So with that, I'll kind of pause here. I'll answer any initial questions members may have, but I would suspect it's probably better to hear from Michelle, kind of go over the mobility provisions, and then we can kind of work those proposals there. But I just wanted to give some comfort to the board members that staff were really strategic in how we kind of approached pulling this information together to make it as successful and meet the board's direction as has been laid out since basically March, May, and July. So.
Thank you, Mr. Franzella. Oh, Ms. Dawn? Just quickly to set up the framework for talking about this agenda item.
You can push, yeah, you don't have to actually lean in at all for these ones apparently, because then it creates the static.
Oh, okay. So because our board president and vice president are absent today, are we making a decision about some of what the language has been drafted today because of the legislative calendar? Or are we having a discussion and tabling it to November to then have a fuller discussion and vote before it moves forward?
So today's discussion is to vote on those proposals to kind of direct, and there's a specific staff recommendation in both of the proposals. That's what staff's looking to do, is get your direction to approve the language that you see before you and direct staff to start the kind of legislative process. The board president and vice president not being here, this is a board decision. It's not a leadership necessarily piece.
Thank you. Any other initial board questions? Okay, so we'll be moving on. Oh, Ms. Salazar.
Mr. Francelli, you'd mentioned the information that had been provided by NAS, but some of those came out before, in the window prior. They came out so close to our meeting that they were not included in the agenda, so they're not specifically noticed for discussion. Will there be plans for a response letter to NASBA for any of the items at a future board meeting? I was just curious about that.
Okay. So yes, the purpose of the interim meeting is really to kind of separate, because our proposals, I think, stand alone and aren't necessarily affected by anything that NASBA has either provided in their exposure draft or the mobility piece that came out yesterday. But I do believe the board staff will recommend that the board does respond. What that response will be for the exposure drafts, or even if we respond, we may not respond to the mobility one at all because it wasn't necessarily a request for response. It was information, but we want to bring that all back to the board between now and November and coordinate ideas on how we want to respond to that. Because hopefully by next week or the week after, we'll actually have the UAA model language that helps with understanding their substantial equivalency model, their UAA licensure model, and how this competency-based framework piece integrates into it, and to make a determination of how we want to respond to that. But they are on a similar track, but two different tracks in terms of what the board's doing and what NASBA is doing. But I do anticipate the board will decide whether or not it wants to respond at that time.
Any additional member questions? Okay, so we'll move on to item H1, discussion and possible action to approve a legislative proposal to update Business and Professions Code Division 3, Chapter 1, Article 2, General Powers and Definitions, to add Section 5035.4 and Article 5.1, Practice Privileges, to amend Sections 5096, 5096.1, 5096.4, 5096.12, 5096.20, 5096.21, and 5096.22. And our Licensing Division Chief, Michelle Senner, will get us kicked off with this first item.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Lauda, members of the board. I am Michelle Senner, or also known as the presenter of the big item, I guess, at this meeting. So the purpose of this agenda item is to provide the board an opportunity to consider and approve a legislative proposal to amend Business and Professions Code to modernize mobility with public protection safeguards. This item is in response to action taken by the board at its July meeting following a presentation of information gathered from various stakeholders. The current mobility laws provide practice privilege rights in California to CPAs with a principal place of business outside of California who are licensed in another state. Licensees who have practiced 4 out of the last 10 years have automatic mobility under our current laws. This most likely applies to many of the out-of-state licensees who are currently practicing in California. California consumers are protected through various safeguards in our mobility laws, and you can find those safeguards detailed in pages 2 through 6 of the materials. I will focus my presentation on the proposed changes to the Business and Professions Code, and I'm going to specifically walk through Attachment 2. So if you want to follow along in Attachment 2, I'll be providing page numbers related to that specific attachment. I will focus my presentation on the larger changes and not really every little minor edit that you will see within Attachment 2. So let's start on page 1 of that attachment. Staff propose adding section 5035.4 to Article 2. This will define comparable licensure requirements, which will replace the term substantially equivalent in Articles 5 and 5.1 of the Business and Professions Code. Staff recommend the replacement of the phrase substantially equivalent because the term may be confused with the determination of substantial equivalency made by NASBA. Comparable licensure requirements are a determination made by this board. Comparable licensure requirement is defined to require passing of the Uniform CPA examination, and that's done via that reference to Section 5082. The definition goes on to say that the education and experience requirements of another state are to be considered collectively when determining if a state's requirements meet or exceed the CBA requirements. This definition allows for differences across states while still holding firm on what matters, namely the requirement of the exam and meeting or exceeding CBA requirements. So moving on to Article 5.1 and the proposed amendment to Section 5096, which starts on page 1, line 31. The changes to Subdivision A remove the prior condition on who is eligible for practice privilege and converts to automatic mobility with safeguards. In most cases, this will allow an out-of-state CPA to practice in California without notice, fee, or a determination of substantial equivalency. Staff are proposing a slight change to Section 5096.1, and that's on page 5, line 37. The proposed amendment recognizes that a CPA may be licensed in multiple states and adds specificity regarding which state board of accountancy outside of California would serve as the individual's agent in any action or proceeding of this board. Next, I want to point out Section 5096.4. While this is an unsubstantive edit, I want to point out that the change, because the language that was removed on page 6, which is kind of a larger area there on page 6, line 16 to 22, it's now included in Section 5096. So this was done just to move that language to a place in the code that seemed just more logical. So on page 8, you will notice that an annotation for Section 5096.20 is missing. So sorry. The changes to this section are updates and do not alter what information is currently posted for out-of-state licensees on our website. So moving on to the bottom of page 8, Section 5096.21. The board already has the authority to remove no notice mobility for all individuals of a particular state if the board finds that allowing individuals of that state to practice in California without notice would violate the board's duty to protect the public. The amendment to this section on page 9, line 21, adds a factor for CBA consideration when making such a determination. The new factor is whether the state has in place and implements comparable licensure requirements. And that is the definition that I started with in the presentation. Lastly, if we want to look at 5096.22, that's on page 10, lines 10 through 17. Those have been amended to include an avenue to allow licensees from states that do not have comparable licensure requirements to seek practice privilege rights by meeting certain qualifications, namely having practiced 4 of the last 10 years, or passing a CPA exam, earning a baccalaureate degree or higher with an accounting concentration, and at least 1 year of general accounting experience. There's also a minor edit on line 7. We inadvertently crossed out the word the. That shouldn't have a strike through. So we will be correcting that. So that includes my high-level overview of the requirements. Hopefully our use of the annotation boxes within the actual language did help all of you digest the changes that we proposed. So our recommendation is that the board approve the legislative proposal as noted in attachment 2 minus those annotations. That would amend sections 5096, 5096.1, 5096.4, 5096.12, 5096.20 through 5096.22, and add section 5035.4. The recommendation also asks that you direct staff to seek an author to carry a CBA-sponsored legislative bill. Authorize staff to combine this legislative proposal with the next proposal in agenda item 6H2, assuming this is approved, and authorize staff to make non-substantive changes such as typographical, grammatical, renumbering, and cross-reference updates. That includes my presentation. I'll turn it back over to Ms. Lotta and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Center. Do we have any board comments or questions regarding this agenda item H1? Ms. Salazar?
So thank you for entertaining some questions that I should probably know the answer to, but I appreciate this. Will you remind me, you mentioned on page, I think it was page 9, there is implementation of comparable licensure requirements. Can you remind the board where comparable is defined? And, words matter. And so how will different people interpret that? And so is that in here as well? That was question number 1.
May I answer? Sorry, I jumped the gun there. So comparable licensure requirements is defined. It's on page 1 of attachment 2. It means another state requires passage of the examination, which is the CPA exam, has education and experience requirements when considered collectively that meet or exceed the standards established by the board pursuant to Article 5.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that I had tied that in to the right place. And then I guess my next question really is about the process. I want to see if maybe this is, if I'm hearing what I think I'm hearing. This currently is deferred to NASBA to make the determination, and we're saying our state will be making our determination. Am I mishearing this?
Ms. Center?
Currently, California does make our own determinations. We have already done that. We have actually made a determination that currently everyone, all of the other jurisdictions are substantially equivalent, and we've done that ourselves. So that is not a change. Unfortunately, California currently uses that term substantially equivalent, as well as NASBA uses that term substantially equivalent. NASBA uses a certain definition as part of that determination, and I think that just causes some confusion across states, and appropriately so. States should be making those determinations themselves about who is substantially equivalent to their own requirements.
And then that reminds me of a fun task force from long, long ago called the Mobility Stakeholder Group, where we went through a very lengthy process for this determination. So I do very clearly recall that process. So I guess my really last question for the staff is just in terms of making sure that we're being thorough, can you address that we have the staff and the ability to handle those processes? I know we did a lot of work on the front end with the mobility determinations. And I just want to make sure that that ongoing work would sort of be at the staff level to identify things if there were issues and bring them to the board. So I just want to make sure that under this scenario that process has been considered and that we could be assured that there would be sufficient resources to ensure ongoing oversight.
Mr. Franzella?
So yes, and that's all taken into consideration. That this provision, nothing that we're doing here, in all honesty, changes what we do today. For all intents and purposes, it decouples the licensure part being at the front end of this mobility discussion and moves it to an appropriate spot within our law and an appropriate structure where the determinations are looked at in a more holistic approach. Because when you look at the NASBA model, or I won't say NASBA model, the UAA model, which includes the AICPA as well, it's heavily reliant and dependent solely on one factor of substantial equivalency, and primarily the 150 semester hour requirement within that substantial equivalency as being this link to all of mobility to a degree. It still leans into the other three E's, but the 150 tends to be the factor, as we've seen on a national level, that has created a lot of frustration with making changes to the educational requirements. The mobility program, the way California has kind of taken a look at it that exists today, was already kind of on this pathway towards looking at it more holistically, not just licensure, but looking at the entirety of the regulatory framework of another state. The MSG, that Mobility Stakeholders Group, the determinations that they went through really weren't the licensure part of it. They were the back end part of it, looking at whether or not a state's enforcement programs were in a sufficient state to make the California feel comfortable that they would properly enforce their licensees. They renewed licensees. They had enforcement standards that were in place that gave a level of comfort to the board to say, yes, these individuals from these states can practice here. So I think the model that California is kind of putting forward is taking a more holistic look to the regulation, because it's, in the model that you kind of see, not in California, but nationally, a state could license somebody under their 150, but not do anything after the fact, and they're considered mobile. They don't even have to renew technically under that UAA type model. But here with California and the enhancements, both what we already have and what we're doing, looks at it more holistically and takes this approach of, is the state licensing comparably, moving off that term substantial equivalency, which kind of has a charged nature to it now, and looking at a comparable model. And do they have these other facets of their regulation that make sure that the board is doing its utmost to ensure consumer protection? And yes, staff we feel comfortable in what we're doing. We do it on a regular basis. We follow all the checklists that were required in here. We have a number of steps Deanne and her team have to do regularly, twice a year, I think. Enforcement does monthly. There's a whole host of things we do. So I feel pretty comfortable. I won't say pretty. I feel very comfortable in what we're doing here. And by giving the board continuing to give the board those determinations, the board always has control over its mobility program.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson?
This question is either for Mr. Franzella or Ms. Center, whomever happens to know. As the language is currently drafted, do we have any concerns that a jurisdiction may not meet the comparable licensure requirements?
No.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Ms. Salazar?
And this is really just a comment for context, not a question, but, Mr. Franzella mentioned some of the reasons we might need, you've both mentioned why we might, as a board, might need to take an action. And I would just point out nationally, not every state is in the same situation, and it is possible. One of the sort of scenarios that I've heard is if there is some anti-regulatory legislation that is forced upon a board in another state, that's the sort of scenario that potentially could be quite realistic. I think it's unlikely that a board would go off the rails, which is a commonly used phrase, but more that they would be forced off the rails and no longer be able to function as they had planned. So I just wanted to add that context to the reality of why, even though we don't expect anyone nationally, that's the environment that is why these things become so important. So thank you.
Ms. Thompson, maybe part two to my question is, has any jurisdiction expressed that they would not accept a California licensed CPA to practice in their state under this proposed change to California's rules?
So our mobility provisions wouldn't have that interconnection isn't there. The licensure, the next proposal you're looking at is where states will have to make determinations of whether or not California changes would affect mobility. So that outbound, not inbound kind of portion. But obviously we do see a national move on an outbound or people looking at their moving off the 150. And even in NASBA's exposure draft that came out, it's a non-150 based model. The question is, how is that going to be incorporated? Again, that's the missing piece right now with the UAA part of it, is not knowing how that's going to be integrated in. So people in other states who might rely on that particular model view California. And so again, California's model as it stands right now could easily, not saying we would do it, but if the board wanted to, could fit in the NASBA model or that UAA model into what we've proposed in our next one as well. So until the board starts doing stuff and until other states start acting, I know Oregon has already moved on certain pieces and other states have done the same, you're not going to know. It's kind of the unknown, but just being realistic about that.
Any other board comments and questions, Ms. Dahl?
Just a question in terms of moving a section, and I know that's not being eliminated, this section about coordination with the PCAOB and the SEC. It says that we link up with them every 6 months. How is that? How is it? Is it sort of automatic? Do they send you a database and then you kind of have to check off the names that are on there? Or how does that work?
So yeah, that's been in the code since, 2012, 13. It was part of the original mobility piece. We're moving it to a more logical section, but staff, Ms. O'Connor's team in enforcement, I think it tells us to do it. It's unclear if it's supposed to be every 6 months or every 2 years, like the way it was written, but we do it every month. We log onto the SEC website, we log onto the PCAOB website, and we look through the recent administrative actions taken by those entities, identify any CPAs or non-California CPAs, and send them a letter and let them know that they're not authorized to practice here under a no notice, no fee mobility program unless they pre-notify us and get clearance to do so.
Mm-hmm. So even if someone's not applying to work in California, you would just send them a notice anyway, just preemptively?
I think the idea is because of a no notice, no fee. Otherwise, they wouldn't tell us necessarily. They'd have to know that they had that notification requirement. And so we try to take the unknown out of it and send them a letter and contact them to say, you had an administrative action. If during the next, I think it's a 6-year look back period that's in the law. If during the next 6 years you intend to operate in California under mobility provisions, you need to submit this form and wait for clearance from the board.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from the board? Comments? Okay, seeing none. Any public comments here in San Marcos for H? Okay, so let me back up. Let's go ahead and get a motion on the table. Ms. Thompson.
To move to accept staff's recommendation. Do I need to read that? No, okay.
Do I have a second? Ms. Corrigan?
Yes, I'll second that motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments from the board now that we have a motion? Okay, seeing none. Any public comment here in San Marcos for agenda item H1? We have Mr. Jason Fox from Cal CPA approaching. Please proceed. Thank you.
New microphone, sorry, I apologize. Jason Fox with California Society of CPAs. You should have a letter in your packet with our viewpoints on this proposal and the next proposal. But consistent with our comments of the July Board of Accountancy meeting, we're encouraged by the board's thoughtful pursuit of practical changes to modernize and bring flexibility and inclusivity to the CPA mobility and licensing rules. We believe the legislative proposal aligns with this direction and encourage the CPA to approve the staff's recommendations to start working with legislative stakeholders to move the proposals forward. With respect to the mobility legislative proposal, I think it's a smart approach of how staff is proposing to modernize the interstate practice framework, separating it from the rigidly defined licensing requirements, which I think affords more options in your next conversation, the next agenda item, to allow for more flexible and inclusive pathways into the profession. So I think the board smartly includes and leverages and expands on a lot of important consumer protection pieces. And I think this is a good way to move forward. So with that, we would support the board's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Any additional public comments here in San Marcos? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment on agenda item H1.
This is the moderator. We've opened public comment for the item. If you'd like to make a comment, please click once on the hand icon to raise your hand, or you may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. We do have a request for comment from a user logged in as Joe Collette. Joe, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 5 minutes with a 30-second warning. And you're unmuted.
California. And I think, oh, sorry, my PDF just moved to a different page, but I was confused a little bit because I saw one reference to determining whether another state would meet California's requirements was based on NASBA's best practices. And I guess my question is, does that really affect determination? Because there seems to be a clause in there that also says it would only matter if California adopted those best practices by NASBA. So I'm wondering how NASBA's policies affect which states we would approve or disapprove.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Frenzella will respond.
So that particular best practice statement is not related to education or educational determinations of substantial equivalency. It's a best practice guide that NASBA has developed related to enforcement practices and was the basis for which the board's mobility stakeholder group performed evaluations back in 2016 to 2018. So it's an enforcement program model, not a licensure model.
Moderator, is there a follow-up question or comment from our public commenter on WebEx? Any other comments?
There are no other comments at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we will go ahead and, Ms. Reed, please take the vote.
Doug Aguilar,
Yes.
Patricia Batchelor,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Nancy Dong,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Christian Lotta,
Yes.
Tony Lynn,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Teresa Thompson,
Yes.
and Evangeline Ward.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Okay, Ms. Center, we will continue on with agenda item H2, discussion and possible action to approve a legislative proposal to update Business and Professions Code Division 3, Chapter 1, Article 5, Certificates, Information and Records to add sections 5093.2, 5093.3, and 5094.7 to amend sections 5081, 5082.3 through 5082.5, 5087, 5088, 5090, 5093, 5093.5, 5094, and 5095, and repeal sections 5086, 5092, 5094.3, and 5094.6. And now back to you, Ms. Center.
So before I start, legal makes me do that. So I'm going to blame, our legal counsel, Michael, for the long titles that we have on these items. Thank you, Michael. So the purpose of this agenda item is to provide the board an opportunity to consider and approve a legislative proposal to amend Business and Professions Code to modify and update licensure requirements. This item is in response to action taken by the board at its July meeting following a presentation of information gathered from various stakeholders. Article 5 of the Business and Professions Code establishes requirements to sit for the Uniform CPA exam and minimum education and experience requirements for CPA licensure. Staff drafted amendments to this article to align with the requirements of a baccalaureate degree with an accounting concentration and 2 years of experience. Those with a master's degree in accounting or taxation would only be required to complete 1 year of experience. Staff drafted the amendments to the article through the lens of creating a more evergreen law with amendments that give the CBA authority to adopt regulations in areas that are more susceptible to change. These words that seem so easy are not as easy when you're up here. I'm sorry. So just like I did last time, I'm going to use the attachment 2, the annotated version, to kind of walk through the changes. I may not hit all of them as I go through. So let's start on page 1 of attachment 2. Staff propose amending section 5081, lines 17 and 18 to add an electronic exam application option to address the upcoming addition, yay, of the exam application to CBA Connect. Cannot happen soon enough. Staff are also recommending that the reference to section 11003 be removed. It is no longer relevant given the elimination of the specific filing dates. Moving on to the bottom of page 2, that's lines 43, 44. Staff are proposing that this section be made inoperable and repealed on January 1, 2026. This section was used to grandfather licensees when Article 5 was amended, but is now obsolete. Staff are proposing to change section 5087, that's on page 3, starting with line 10. That replaces the term substantially equivalent with comparable licensure requirements. That's consistent with the change that this board just voted on in the last item. I'm now on pages 4 and 5, section 5092. Staff are recommending that this section be repealed because it is inoperative as of January 1, 2014, and would become operative again with the amendment to section 5093, which I will talk about next. That would be unfortunate. So the amendment to 5093, and that is near the top of page 7, lines 8 through 14. The addition of subdivision G provides a legacy pathway for individuals currently in the pipeline to gain licensure by meeting the current educational requirements with 1 year of experience, or by the proposed educational requirements and up to 2 years of experience. This section will eventually become inoperative and will be repealed. Notice that there isn't a date on line 13. The proposal includes numerous insert date references or example dates. The example date provided here actually should be December 31, 2027. There should be 1 day difference, not a year difference there. But if the proposal is approved, staff will bring back in November proposed implementation dates or implementation date options for the board to consider in November. So if we stay on page 7, staff are proposing an addition of section 1593.2, which includes the proposed minimum educational requirement of a baccalaureate degree with an accounting concentration. It also provides the CBA with authority to establish an expressway so that certain accounting and taxation degrees could be deemed to fully satisfy the educational requirements. What constitutes an accounting or taxation degree would be specified in regulations. That's one of those areas that we thought might potentially change over time. And so to make sure it's evergreen, we have made that determination via regulations. So the 2 ways that applicants may sit for the exam prior to meeting the minimum educational requirements, those would be early entry or the dual degree option. Those were moved to this section, and that was just done for clarity, so they're all in one place. Staff are proposing the addition of section 5093.3. That begins near the bottom of page 8. The new section establishes the experience requirements for licensure and sets the minimum requirement at 2 years. It allows for 1 year experience if an applicant has a master's degree in accounting or taxation. Specific additions were made to provide avenues for the board to enhance the experience requirement, either by the requirement to complete job-based tasks or by allowing for specified certificate or training programs to count toward qualifying experience. Staff believe the proposed amendments create a sufficient foundation by which the board could enact enhanced experience requirements in the future. Moving on to the top of page 10, lines 5 through 6, staff are proposing that section 5093.5 become inoperative and be repealed at a future date to align with the repeal of the current educational requirements. And the early entry program aligned with the proposed educational requirements. As I mentioned earlier, that was moved to the new section 5093.2. The next section to be amended is section 5094. That starts on page 10. But the major change in that is actually located on page 11, lines 6 through 8. The proposed amendment clarifies that a college, university, or other institution of learning outside of the United States at which qualifying education is earned must grant degrees. It also clarifies that colleges, universities, or other institutions of learning that provide qualifying education shall be referred collectively as institutions of higher education. Staff are proposing that sections 5094.3 and 5094.6 be deemed inoperative and repealed. That's to allow transition to the proposed educational requirements that are established in the new section. This is another one of those dates that will be brought back to the board in November, assuming the text of this legislative language is approved today. Lastly, let's look at section 5094.7. That's on page 13. Staff are proposing the addition of section 5094.7 to give the board authority to adopt emergency regulations to establish policies and procedures to implement amendments and additions that are proposed for Article 5, supposing the board-sponsored bill is enacted. Staff will provide the board with additional information on the necessity of emergency regulations in November when we bring forth those implementation options for you to consider. That concludes my presentation on the edits. Now I will read the half-page motion for you to consider. Approve the legislative proposal as noted in attachment 2, exclusive of those annotations that are in there. That legislative proposal adds sections 5093.2, 5093.3, and 5094.7. It amends sections 5081, 5082.3, 5082.4, 5082.5, 5087, 5088, 5090, 5093, 5093.5, 5094, and 5095. And it repeals sections 5086, 5092, 5094.3, and 5094.6. Direct staff to seek an author to carry the board-sponsored legislative bill. Authorize staff to combine this legislative proposal with the legislative proposal that you approved in the last item. Authorize staff to make non-substantive changes such as typographical, grammatical, renumbering, and cross-reference updates. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Center. Do we have any board comments or questions? Ms. Thompson?
Not a question, but I just wanted to recognize you and your staff for putting together a very thorough package on both items H1 and H2. I'm sure this was a lot of work, and I very much appreciated the level of detail you guys went into. So thank you.
Ms. Corrigan?
Yes, I had the same thought, and the annotations were very helpful in following and understanding the changes, which would otherwise be somewhat difficult, complicated. So staff always do a great job. Thank you.
Ms. Hines?
Yeah, the annotations were incredibly helpful and led to what what might be a nitpicky kind of a question or comment. On page 7, in the section 5093.2, in the annotation, it says that to increase, I guess this is on the next page, lines 18 through 21, it says that to increase the longevity of the proposal, the criteria of what would constitute an accounting or taxation degree would be specified via regulations. So I assume that what it's trying to do is going back up to line 28. This legislation is trying to give the CBA the authority to make that definition via regulation, like the legislature is like conceding that authority to the CBA. But I think that phrase to the satisfaction of the board, I think that could be clearer. I think it could be a more clear statement that the CBA shall have the authority to define, because in other areas of this legislation, it is very clear that what the legislation, it either defines what something is or it says the CBA can define what it is. And that's one section where it doesn't say CBA can define what the degree is. So just like I said, kind of a nitpicky wordsmithing suggestion to look at it.
Mr. Franzella? Oh, sorry, Mr. Coates.
That's the next, Michael Knotes, legal counsel. Excuse me, I haven't been using this voice. That's a very apt comment and catch there. But there is general regulatory authority built into our Practice Act that covers that. At times there are those statements in the law, the board shall make regulations, and really that's the legislature directing the board to do something. We always have the ability to adopt regulations to make more specific these types of issues, and I don't view that as being an issue.
Thank you. But my main concern is because this is such a substantive change in such a significant matter, and because the rest of it is so detailed, and that is something where we're talking about the educational requirements really being interpreted to grant, be utilized to give the basis for why someone is licensed. I think being more clear, erring on the side of being more clear, especially where it is so detailed throughout the legislation, I think it's a nitpicky thing, but it's a suggestion but I just wanted to put out there to consider it.
Center.
I think there's nothing wrong with making that addition and clarifying it. While it isn't necessarily needed because of that general authority, there's nothing wrong with pointing it out that shall be done via regulation if that makes the board more comfortable.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments? Ms. Dahl?
So in the past, I've mentioned sort of my lack of ignorance of how international students can apply, and I want to make sure that there are safeguards that prevent us from opening the floodgates to students who don't necessarily have equivalent educational requirements to be able to sort of sit for the CPA exam. So I know that there's an amended section here, and so I just had some clarifying questions about this. So for section 5094C, it says that the board, which I assume is this board, will deem whether or not the institution can confer degrees that are equivalent to the U.S. standards, sort of summarizing that point. How do you anticipate being able to make that determination?
So 5094C, there is very little edits to what's in there now. We do use our approved evaluation services providers, and they look at whether or not there's accreditation. They review the actual degrees themselves, transcripts and courses for those who have foreign education, and provide us their evaluation on not only the courses, but also the particular degree. Mm-hmm. And that is no different than what we do now.
And who are those providers? Who are those service providers?
Those are service providers that other professions use, as well as our institutions of higher education use. WES is one of those service providers. NASBA is one of those service providers. They have a wide range of experts, not only in the content, but as well as in the languages that they review transcripts for. We have a process that we use to review those providers. They have to be board approved providers, the evaluation service providers. And we also have a process where we have to renew them.
Mm-hmm. So are you doing sort of an audit of the companies that you're currently using to make sure they're looking at the right things, that they're, dotting the I's and crossing the T's when it comes to evaluating some of these foreign institutions?
I'm sorry, Ms. Lauder, are you okay?
Yeah.
The center. So we use the renewal process to look at that. It is not uncommon. In the last couple months, I think we did remove someone from our list. So we are very active in looking at not only the renewal, but if we have received information from them that we don't believe is of the highest quality, we take action. We call them, we ask for documentation, information. If we are not satisfied, we do remove them from the board-approved list of evaluators.
Okay. Mr. Franzella?
I just wanted to point out in that section, Ms. Dong, the next subsection in there, 1594, gosh, my eyes are terrible, D, provides kind of, the legislature has already dictated how the board is to evaluate those services and gives very specific criteria, and the board has those in regulation as well. So it is a fairly comprehensive process that we utilize to make sure that they're meeting the legislative direction on foreign education.
Mm-hmm. So this would be a legislative standard that has been used in other areas that's now being applied.
It's not
the expressway for education.
Yeah, it's nothing's being changed. And the expressway part of it would not apply to the foreign education. That was a direction that the board had provided back in July, that the expressway would be for U.S.-based education only. The concentration, if I'm right, the classes themselves would be utilized for, it's not that they wouldn't be able to apply and obtain licensure or sit for the exam. They would have to go through the current process of looking at the courses individually, baccalaureate degree. There wouldn't be that expressway option for them.
Mm-hmm. Do we need to specify if the expressway is not available for foreign institutions?
It's in the materials.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Dong. Any additional board questions or comments? Okay, one second. I just have one clarifying question, Ms. Center. On page 2 of the materials, the 4th bullet down from the top, it says to reduce the minimum accounting concentration unit requirement presently at 44 units for applicants who do not qualify for the expressway. I wasn't fully understanding. I just wanted a clarification of that bullet and how it translates into the legislative proposal.
Sure. The legislative proposal before you today, one of the areas by which we would add that detail and longevity is putting those unit requirements in our regulations instead of in the statute itself. The difference between having a 150 model and having what is proposed in here is reevaluating that need for the extra 30 units. 20 of them were for accounting study, and then we had the 10 for ethics. Those specific units were added for the sole purpose of trying to make those extra 30 units to get to 150 meaningful. That was the sole reason for doing those. As we discussed at our last meeting, why did we do 150? It was to keep substantial equivalency. That movement was not because of concerns with quality. It was more of a concern with wanting to make sure that we had mobility. So we can reevaluate whether or not we need that and whether or not we can make our requirements what is needed for minimum competency that may not be as high as what we currently have.
Thank you. Did you still have a question, Ms. Salazar?
And I appreciate that. I just want to have a comment, to that point, our conversation in our state was not around quality, but nationally there was a whole host, and I went through a litany of challenges at the national level when 150, sort of the argument for 150 nationally. So I would just remind folks, although we didn't adopt 150 within our state, because of, say, quality concerns, nationally, there is a conversation about rigor and, comfort with change from 150. So there was a question by a board member earlier that was on the prior item, which was, do we know yet if any other states would have a concern with mobility? So again, I just want to say our experience isn't the same as everyone else's. So I do have continued concerns about this pathway and quantifying the impact for our licensees. Would folks in this proposed pathway, not be accepted in other states? And I'm not sure that we have an answer yet. I don't know if staff has any comments, but I did want to reiterate that, highlight, add some context, and also re-elevate that prior question that was presented.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar. Mr. Franzello?
Thank you, Ms. Lada. Yes, to your point, you're right. We don't know what that impact would be on that outbound kind of model, but I think if we're looking through some part of the lens, the national model has moved. They were trying to do 150 and then educate or experiential learning and some of these other pieces to maintain a 150 kind of equivalency, including off-transcript experience type piece. It's been clear for a little bit now, and I think with the exposure depth that came out, that discussion has moved to a baccalaureate degree model. That really the emphasis is now where that experience piece kind of falls in and how experience interplays with the 2-year piece, whether or not it's a 1+1 kind of idea or 2 years, or is it for every experience type? So I think, at least on a national level, I think there's a comfort of moving to a baccalaureate degree as a base point for entry from an education standpoint. The question I think that this board, as Ms. Salazar has pointed out, and I think that the board will kind of start noodling through a bit more in the interim meeting and going forward, is what that experience model is going to look like. And then understanding how states are going to adopt around that. I do think some of that's built into the substantial equivalency definition and how that's going to be looked at. So I regret that we're not in a position to say an absolute yes or no, but I think there is a movement nationally to kind of move into a baccalaureate degree option. And then I think that's what's being fleshed out now. And as I mentioned earlier, and I think Ms. Center has highlighted, your regulation, the statute is such that it continues to use general accounting experience as the foundation, but gives this board a lot of permissive authority to look at an enhanced experience model that makes sense in California. That may not just be for this one group, it may be for all of experience that we want, that might need to be enhanced after discussion. So the box is bigger than maybe what we have today or what is being kind of even considered nationally. We have a bigger box with which to fill up.
Thank you, Mr. Franzella. Ms. Salazar?
And I would like to thank staff for the materials. I think they're really good. I think these are really difficult issues, and I appreciate the legislative calendar that we have to work with. And I'm just going to share my thought is, there are some benefits to moving forward on this for the legislative calendar to give our state maximum flexibility. We are on a different timeline than most other states because of how lengthy our process is. I would just say, Dominic, Mr. Franzella mentioned the 2 tracks, and the California track in front of you could certainly be inclusive of a national competency-based framework model. But I would also encourage you as a board, as you continue to look at this in future meetings, which I am sure you will, to be very open to both of those tracks and to continue to analyze. I know the staff will be doing that. And so for me, I look at this and say, it doesn't say, no, we don't want this. We would only do that. But that this is a position to allow maximum flexibility. So I would just encourage the board to continue to be thorough and to do your due diligence and to ask the questions about both tracks as we have future meetings, which hopefully I'll be at, but maybe not with my grace year ending. But I'm very excited about this and appreciate the openness and the, again, though I have many concerns with both tracks, I do see this option as being very inclusive and helping present options to future licensees. So again, hopefully we can balance those needs, the protection of the consumers, and all of the things that the board needs to do. But I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate how this is a very open process, and that it is not a commitment to lock in for future actions, and that this board continues to have that dialogue. So thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar. Now that we've had a pretty good discussion about this item, is any board member comfortable making a motion? Ms. Batchelor?
I motion to move. Staff recommendation.
Any second? Ms. Corrigan?
Yes, I will second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any additional board comments or questions now that we have a motion on the table? Seeing none, any public comment here in San Marcos on item H2? We have Mr. Jason Fox approaching the table from Cal CPA. Thank you.
Jason Fox with the California Society of CPAs. We support the legislative proposal to modernize the CPA licensing framework by providing multiple routes into the profession, more flexibility for candidates to meet the licensure requirements, and inclusive of candidates with diverse backgrounds. I think the way the staff have approached it from a practical standpoint makes a lot of sense. It provides clear guidance to candidates and students and builds some more evergreenness into the model to accommodate future licensing and education changes. And I do want to underscore the inclusion of the provisions to give the board the options to consider as those dual tracks take shape. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but this gives the board a lot of flexibility to have those conversations when that does occur. So that would support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Any additional public comments? Please proceed.
I'm Dr. Aaron Stiles. I'm Dr. Alan Stiles. I'm chair of the Department of Accounting. I've been teaching accounting for 30 years. I've been in various roles within the American Accounting Society. I work with the GASB, so I have extensive experience in accounting education. I generally support improvements in this process to get a CPA license that would remove barriers, would allow more encouragement and diversity. And I think that this generally conceptually does remove barriers, but I would really caution about the actual implications of some of the things that be considered. I strongly support the idea that the board define early what an institution would be that would provide that education for a number of reasons. One of them being, to be honest, if you give it our experience in education in California in the last few years, if you give it to the legislature, you may not like the solution. There's more things that go into it. There's a lot of political things. In the CSU, the UC, and the community colleges, we've seen a lot of political wrangling going on, a lot of lobbying. As of yet, recently, there are measures that have been forced down the throats of the universities and have not been accepted very well, but we've been told. One of them being around GE, they have been imposed on us. Even though we didn't want it. And there are many other ways that has happened. So if you don't define what type of institutions, the legislature may do that for you. And I also caution about the quality issue of those programs. Education is a lot of it's a lot of flux, and there's a lot of programs that are attracting students by not offering the same rigor as other programs. I'm very concerned about that students will make decisions. They are consumers of education, and they will make decisions about programs based upon ease of graduation, and then they assume that program then prepares them for a career as a CPA, but first off, they've got to get through the CPA exam. And that the trend in many programs is not going towards an exam preparation. There's a lot of open notes. There's a lot of online exams without any integrity going on. So as consumers, they may be led to believe that they've got over one hurdle, getting the bachelor's, and not having to get the master's, and then find themselves not being able to pass the exam or taking extended period of time. And we also live in an environment where there's not transparency about evaluation of academic programs anymore. For a number of years, NASBA produced data about CPA exam results by universities. They've stopped that. I've heard that there's talk of it coming back, but it sounds like they're going to go with the same model, that people have to pay to get access to that data. Our example here is one, we didn't have access because we didn't have the money to pay for the books. And it's, if you're going to do this model, I'd have two suggestions. First off, that you demand or expect as the biggest regulator of accounting that NASBA stop charging for this data. It should be public data. It's public interest at this point. It shouldn't be a revenue stream. It could ask members of NASBA to contribute more so that it wasn't passed as costs on to consumer. And the other major recommendation I'd make is that instead of valuation that sort of is reactionary on programs, is that you ask any program that wishes to have their degree considers eligible to submit a certain amount of documentation. You could have a hierarchy. You could say AACSB or a certain category. Okay, you don't have to do so much. But I'm talking about the other schools that, to be honest, from my perspective, are not reputable. And they target students. There's been investigations at the federal level about the for-profit institutions, what they do. And so be careful. Make sure you keep control in the CBA. Don't hand it over, excuse my language, to the crapshoot of the legislature. You might regret it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional public comments here in San Marcos on this agenda item? Seeing none, moderator, please open WebEx for public comment on agenda item H2.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that. Type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 5 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on the motion? And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Ms. Reed, please take a vote.
Evangeline Ward,
Yes.
Teresa Thompson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Tony Lynn,
Yes.
Christian Lotta,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Nancy Dong,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Patricia Batchelor,
Yes.
and Doug Aguilera.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Okay, so now we'll be continuing on to agenda item H3, which is our overview of legislative and communication activities for CBA-sponsored legislative proposals and discussion and possible approval of an interim or additional CBA meeting in October. And I'm turning it over to Ms. Deanne Pierce, our Assistant Executive Officer, for presentation of this item.
Thank you. So provided in the attachment is an overview of the legislative process, which details the process and steps that occur for a bill to become a law. If the CBA serves as a sponsor for legislation, CBA leadership and members will play a significant role. As the bill is heard in the policy committees, the legislature may rely on the professional expertise from CBA members to gain a stronger understanding of the issue. It is also beneficial for members to meet with legislators in advance of hearings to address any questions or concerns. In addition to CBA member involvement, communication and messaging are also critical to the success of any bill. If the CBA sponsors legislation, communicating with stakeholders and identifying how it will further the CBA's consumer protection mission will be critical to the bill's success. As Ms. Center discussed in the prior two agenda items, the CBA's proposals would modernize mobility and provide flexibility to the licensure requirements. Under the present framework, concepts of mobility and licensure requirements are intertwined, making it difficult to take important steps to create flexible licensure requirements while minimizing disruptions to mobility, which is crucial to consumers, licensees, and the overall economy. The CBA's proposals modernize mobility by creating an evergreen approach without sacrificing the important consumer protection safeguards, and creates flexibility in the licensure requirements to add options to demonstrate minimum competencies for safe practice while reducing barriers to entry. The mobility legislative proposal modernizes the current California mobility provisions and adds an additional layer of consumer protection. The proposal aligns with the core principles of CPA mobility, where a CPA is recognized as a CPA regardless of their jurisdiction or licensing pathway. Starting on page 4 and continuing on to page 5 are consumer safeguards that will be part of the communications and messaging. These safeguards range from needing to obtain CBA approval before practicing, ceasing practice if there is a disqualifying condition, being under the disciplinary authority of the CBA, and ensuring consumers have access on the CBA website to the licensing information for any CPA, regardless of where they are licensed. The legislative proposal also incorporates a new provision where the CBA may determine that a jurisdiction does not have education, examination, and experience requirements comparable to California's own licensure requirements. The statutory language would require licensees of such a state to meet additional criteria to practice public accountancy in California under mobility. The license requirements proposal creates flexibility while still protecting consumers. The licensure requirements should establish the minimum level of competencies most relevant to the work of a newly licensed CPA and their role in protecting the public. The legislative proposal the CBA approved in the prior agenda item modernizes these requirements in California. As the proposal moves forward, it will be important to reemphasize, certain messaging concepts to support the changes, including those identified on pages 6 and 7 of the agenda item. The proposal refocuses equal weight on all the core components of CPA licensure, including education, examination, and experience, and creates multiple pathways to meet minimum competency for safe and effective practice, and shifts education from unit requirements to degree conferral, ensuring long-term sustainability as higher education evolves. The proposed changes to the licensure requirements will not impact consumer protection. A similar pathway to the proposed was offered prior to 2014, both in California and nationally.
As Executive Officer Franzella stated in his opening remarks, an exposure draft was released following the mailout for this meeting containing a proposal related to modifying licensure requirements. And yesterday, NASBA released information regarding automatic mobility. Staff recommends the CBA authorize the president to work with the executive officer to schedule an interim meeting before the November 21-22 meeting for the CBA to review and consider a response on the current exposure draft, potential UAA exposure draft issued on modifying licensure requirements, and to discuss the information released yesterday by NASBA on automatic mobility. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Ms. Lotta for a possible motion to schedule an interim meeting before the regularly scheduled November meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this item? Ms. Hines?
Practically speaking, can you just explain, Ms. Pierce, how that would work? Whether we would be expected to meet in person or whether it's something that could be scheduled to meet virtually?
Ms. Pierce?
Yes, there would be a virtual meeting, so it would not require members to travel and attend in person, although that would be an option for any member that wanted to do so.
Thank you for the clarification. Any additional comments or questions from the board? Would a board member like to make a motion on this item? Ms. Salazar?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the scheduling for an interim meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Aguilera? Okay. Do I have any additional board comments now that we have a motion on the table? Seeing none, are there any public comments here in San Marcos on this agenda item? Seeing none, moderator, please open WebEx for Q&A on agenda item H3.
This is the moderator, and we've opened up public comment for this item. If you'd like to make a comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that once to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on this measure? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Ms. Reed, please take the vote.
Doug Aguilera?
Yes.
Patricia Batchelor?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Nancy Dawn?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Tony Lynn?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Teresa Thompson?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward? The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. We will now take our morning 15-minute break. So we will be resuming at 11:16. We'll be resuming at 11:15. All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and conclude our break and continue on. Our next item is agenda item 7, which is the report of the Vice President, which I will be giving on behalf of our Vice President Yen Tu, who is not in attendance today. So this is a recommendation for appointment or reappointment to the Enforcement Advisory Committee. This item is to recommend the appointment of Michael L. Williams, CPA, to the Enforcement Advisory Committee. The Enforcement Advisory Committee assists the CBA in an advisory capacity with enforcement activities. This includes reviewing closed investigation files, providing technical guidance on open investigations, and participating in investigative hearings. Vice President Tu conferred with the CBA Executive Officer to verify that Mr. Williams has met the appropriate requirements for license renewal and has demonstrated the skills and knowledge to serve as a member on the Enforcement Advisory Committee. Mr. Williams is currently on the Qualifications Committee, where he is serving as chair and has previously served as vice chair. Can I get a motion to appoint Michael L. Williams, CPA, through September 30th, 2026?
I move to appoint Mike.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ms. Hines?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any additional member comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, are there any public comments here in San Marcos on this item? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment on agenda item 7A.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on this item? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Ms. Reed, please take a vote.
Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
Teresa Thompson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Tony Lynn?
Yes.
Christian Lauder?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
Nancy Dawn? Yes. Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Patricia Batchelor?
Yes.
And Doug Aguilar?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We will continue on to agenda item 7B. This item is to recommend the reappointment of Timothy T. Jones, CPA. The Qualifications Committee assists the CBA in its licensure activities by reviewing the experience of applicants for licensure and making recommendations to the CBA. This includes conducting work paper reviews with the applicant or the employer present to verify that the responses provided are reflective of the requisite experience for licensure. Vice President 2 conferred with the CBA Executive Officer to verify that Mr. Jones has met the appropriate requirements for license renewal and has demonstrated the skills and knowledge to continue to serve as a member on the Qualifications Committee. Can I get a motion to reappoint Timothy T. Jones, CPA, through September 30th, 2026 to the Qualifications Committee? Ms. Hines?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Ms. Salazar?
Second?
Thank you. Any additional board comments or questions regarding this item? Seeing none, are there any public comments here in San Marcos for agenda item 7B? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment on agenda item 7B.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Ms. Reed, please take the vote.
Doug Aguilar?
Yes.
Patricia Batchelor?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Nancy Dawn?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
Christian Lauder?
Yes.
Tony Lynn?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Teresa Thompson?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. So for agenda item 7C, our recommendations for appointment and reappointment to the Peer Review Oversight Committee. We have none of those today, so we will continue on to agenda item 8, which is the report of the Secretary Treasurer, which is my report that I'll be giving. So provided for your review is the Secretary Treasurer report containing the fiscal year 2023-2024 year-end financial statement. The CBA budget authority for fiscal year 2023 and 24 was $19,734,000. CBA total revenues for fiscal year 2023 to 2024 amounted to almost $19 million, which is an increase of 11.7% from the prior fiscal year 2022 and 23. Displayed on page 3 is the fiscal month 13 financial statement, which reflects actual expenditures in the amount of $17,363,313, resulting in a surplus of over 12%, or approximately $2.4 million. Pages 4 through 6 highlight key expenditure items. Areas such as overtime, general expense, postage, and printing reflect a significant savings when compared to the prior fiscal year 2022-2023. Page 7 displays enforcement expenditures for the past 5 fiscal years, which have stayed relatively the same when compared to the prior fiscal year, 2022-2023. Located on page 9 is the CBA fund condition statement. The general fund loan was repaid in fiscal year 2023-2024, accompanied by $203,645 in interest. The repayment of the general fund loan and increase in revenues as a result of the October 2022 fee increase attributed to ending fiscal year 2023-2024 with 11.9 months in the reserve fund. This concludes my presentation of the fiscal year 2023-2024 year-end financial statement. I'm happy to answer and have staff available to answer any questions members may have. Additionally, which I was supposed to start off with this, but I forgot. So Ms. Pierce has some comments about the Secretary-Treasurer report as well.
Thank you. Secretary Lotta identified some errors in the narrative portion of the report. So the report was corrected and was emailed to members yesterday, and a hard copy was placed on the table this morning. And the website will be updated with the revised report as well. The financial statement on page 3 is accurate. No changes were made to that. Some of the numbers in the narrative didn't match the financial statement, and those were updated.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Okay, do we have any board comments on the Secretary-Treasurer report or questions? Seeing none, any public comments here in San Marcos on the Secretary-Treasurer report? Seeing none, moderator, please open Q&A for public comment on our Secretary-Treasurer report.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on the Secretary-Treasurer report, you may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send, or you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Any questions on the report? Comments? I see no request for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Moving on to agenda item number 9, our report of the executive officer. We'll start off with 9A, our administrative activity report, which will be presented by Ms. Deanne Pierce.
Thank you. So Ms. Bucciarelli, the DCA representative, provided an update on the 2 budget reductions during her update. As she mentioned, we're awaiting feedback from the Department of Finance, and we will share information with the CBA once it's available. The CBA has started a new phase of the business modernization project. This exciting phase will see the development of new online options for examination applicants on the CBA Connect platform. The CBA's information technology staff will work alongside the programmers to develop and configure the new system. Additionally, we're recruiting to fill the vacant project specialist position previously held by Suzanne Gracia, who was recently promoted to Deputy Chief of Licensing. And that concludes my presentation, but I will turn it back to Ms. Lotta, and I'm happy to answer any questions the members may have.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Do we have any board member comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we will go ahead and take public comment for this item along with agenda item 9B. So we'll go ahead and continue on to our communications and outreach report presentation by Mr. David Hemphill, our information and planning officer.
Morning. Thank you again, Ms. Lotta. Hello, members of the CBA. So I'd like to start the communications and outreach report by highlighting all the exciting outreach events that have taken place in conjunction with this meeting. The activities kicked off on a Wednesday evening at the University of California, San Diego Extended Studies campus. CBA Vice President 2, a proud UCSD alumni, joined CBA member Doug Aguilera and myself to give presentations to students on the role of the CBA, value of the CPA license, and the requirements for examination and licensure. We also had 4 members of our licensing division staff that were on site to do in-person transcript reviews. Those were always a success. A lot of excited students learning about how their requirements and coursework fit in. The event was definitely a success. There was a lot of students, a lot of engagement with our question and answer time afterwards. I want to compliment Mr. Aguilera, had some good stories for the students, so that was really great. We appreciated your time there. So that was a great event on Wednesday evening. But that's not all, of course. More exciting events took place right here yesterday when we shifted to the McMahon House here at California State University, San Marcos. We began with your CPA Roadmap event featuring presentations by CBA Secretary Treasurer Christian Latta, CPA, and member Nancy Corrigan, CPA, as well as CBA staff. We also had a great time. We love the little courtyard area out here, so we had a meet and mingle session. So thank all of you members that were part of that. And I hope you found that as engaging as I'm sure the students did. They were able to approach you and ask so many questions. So that really is a valuable resource to them. So again, I appreciate all of your time for doing that. And I've heard nothing but great things from the faculty and the students about that event. We did many more transcript reviews as well. In addition to those events, we had Timothy Jones, a member of the qualifications committee, spoke to students in 2 different accounting classes yesterday morning about career opportunities within the profession. Licensing Chief Michelle Center spoke with San Marcos faculty here about the changes proposed with the Sure CPA project. We also had our executive officer, Dominic Franzella. There was an event in the afternoon with local accounting firms that he participated in as well. So it's definitely been a successful 2 days of engagement and interaction and really starting that relationship with the students and the CBA. So we couldn't be happier. I'd like to take a quick moment and introduce a new addition to our communications and outreach team. I believe she's sitting behind me somewhere. Madeline Masante. Madeline, friends by Maddie. So she's our new outreach coordinator. She's been with us only about a month, but some of you have already interacted with her a little on email. She has a strong background in both traditional and new media, and I know she's going to play an instrumental role in supporting our CBA outreach activities. Moving on to multimedia content, I'm pleased to share the results of the This is the CBA media campaign that many of you participated in last year. So it was live for 2 months. It had a 2-month run from May to July, and the campaign achieved 11.4 million impressions. Out of those, 7 million were unique viewers. The campaign's use of contextual keyword targeting brought us a click-through rate surpassed industry averages. And so they clicked through the video back to our website where we had a page that featured all 5 of our videos under the This is the CBA campaign. This success highlighted the impact of the CBA's consumer protection mission and our efforts to promote the CPA profession. And once again, thank you to all of you who participated in that, and as well as DCA Director Kimberly Kirkmeyer, who participated as well. So that was a very successful campaign. We recently completed a new video called The 3 E's of Licensure. The video breaks down the examination, education, and experience requirements for becoming a CPA using simple explanations and engaging graphics. And I would love to show it to you right now. Let's take a peek at it together. So roll the video up on the big screen.
I made up my mind. I want to become a CPA.
Great choice. There are plenty of job opportunities in a wide variety of fields with good pay available once you obtain that CPA license.
What exactly do you have to do to get a CPA license?
CPA wants to make that as easy to understand as possible. So in this video, we'll break it down for you. All you have to remember are the 3 E's: education, examination, and experience. Let's start with education.
Okay, sounds good.
There are educational requirements you need to fulfill before you are approved to sit for the uniform CPA examination.
That's the CPA exam, right?
Yeah, that's right. The educational requirements include a bachelor's degree and 24 semester units of accounting courses and 24 semester units of business-related courses. Once you accomplish this, you're ready to apply to take the CPA exam. You may even be able to apply to take the CPA exam before your degree has been conferred, as long as you are currently enrolled in a college or university within 180 days of completing the educational requirements. There are more education requirements for licensure, but we'll get to those a little later. Want to take the second E?
Examination. I've been looking into this. The CPA exam is a computer-based test divided into 4 sections. 3 of the sections are referred to as core sections and include auditing and attestation, financial accounting and reporting, and taxation and regulation. The 4th section is the discipline section, and you have your choice of 3 disciplines: business analysis and reporting, information systems and controls, and tax compliance and planning. It's your choice what order you take the sections in and how quickly you take them. That's also up to you. although most candidates generally spread them out to allow ample time for preparation. The only thing you do have to keep in mind is that you have to pass all 4 sections within a 30-month period. Happy studying.
After you pass the CPA exam, it's time to start thinking about applying for your license. But first, the final E comes into play.
Experience.
Correct. You'll need 12 months of general accounting experience supervised by a CPA with a current and valid license. If you want to have the authority to sign reports on attest engagements, you will need to complete a minimum of 500 hours of experience in attest services. The experience must be supervised by a CPA with attest authority. Remember earlier I mentioned there were some extra education requirements for licensure?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Glad you've been paying attention. So here they are. In addition to the bachelor's degree and the 24 accounting and 24 business-related units to take the CPA exam, you need another 20 units of accounting study and 10 units of ethics. You also must complete a total of 150 semester units of coursework. Between passing your CPA exam, completing your education, and earning your 12 months of accounting experience, you've now satisfied all the requirements.
The 3 E's.
Yes, and now you are ready to apply for your CPA license. Want to tell them how they do this?
Don't mind if I do. I went on the CBA website and I saw that this can now be done entirely online with the CBA's online application for CPA licensure. You're able to upload documents, pay your application fee with a credit card, and submit your license application, all with just a few clicks of your mouse.
Like you said, just go to the CBA website to get started. That's www.cba.ca.gov. Of course, the CBA is always here to help you along the way. On the Contact the CBA page of the website, you will find the email addresses you can use to ask questions.
I feel much better about all of this now. The requirements make sense as long as I remember the 3 E's. Education, examination, and experience.
Good luck on your journey to becoming a CPA.
All right. Another great job by the team. Video, Mr. Studio, our multimedia specialist, doing a great job on the videos as always. All right, so excited for everyone to see that and come back. Okay. On the communications front, the CBA recently transitioned to the Listserv platform for our e-news and other email communications. Listserv is going to offer us enhanced functionality, including the ability to incorporate hyperlinks and graphic designs into our emails. DCA is also working on enhancements that would enable the collection of data from sent emails, which we hope to have in place soon. I'm excited to announce the upcoming release of update issue number 102, which will be published within the next week or so. It includes articles such as the top causes for citation from the Enforcement Division, renewability for accounting firms to renew using CBA Connect, and a breakdown of the CBA's budget allocation for the last fiscal year. It also features an interview with CBA member Doug Aguilera, and the first of a new series highlighting interesting career opportunities within the accounting profession. We're already at work on issue 103, which is expected to be released around Thanksgiving. Something else we're working on is the CBA 2023-2024 annual report, which will spotlight the achievements of each major unit within the CBA over the past year, and we will be presenting this report to you at the November meeting. Lastly, I'd like to highlight our social media growth. The CBA's social platforms experienced their highest single month increase ever in August, gaining 419 new followers, breaking the previous record of 411 new followers we just set back in June. The success of the August growth was largely driven by interest in the licensure requirement proposals discussed at our July CBA meeting. We produced a meeting recap video which explained the proposals that we posted on LinkedIn. Now, that video was reposted over 30 times, resulting in the video getting 15,000 views. So things like that is when you really get interaction and new followers. We're excited about that. Clearly showing the importance of keeping stakeholders informed about CBA activities, especially when significant topics like licensure changes are on the agenda. So we're definitely going to do another one, a recap video for this meeting as well. I would like to call your attention to a typo in the report. The numbers listed for LinkedIn in the social media section, the total followers should read 6,469 instead of 6,369. The graph was correct, but we got the wrong number in the count. This also increases the growth from the last 3 months to over 1,000, which is an impressive gain. All right, that concludes my presentation on this agenda item. I'll now turn it back over to Ms. Lata. I'm happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hemphill. Are there any board questions or comments on agenda item 9B? I just wanted to say I thought the recap video is such a good addition to our website. We often want to keep our licensees and candidates informed, but actually attending virtually is pretty rigorous with the length of our meetings. So I think that's such a great idea, and clearly it's working with the stats that you shared. So thank you for that.
So just two questions to follow up on the mobile platforms. If we were able to make it a much more streamlined experience for someone looking at the website and these videos on their phone, if that impacts load speeds at all, I don't know.
The way we do it on the videos page is that only one video populates at a time. And then when you click each link below that, then it populates more videos. So that's something we noticed at first as we were adding to the videos page. It was taking a little more time for them to load. So that's something that our webmaster recommended. So we did that as well. So that is something that we continue to keep in mind.
And the second question was in terms of languages. Where are we in terms of translating into the language, especially Spanish?
Yeah, we do. The last video, if you recall, we did translate into Spanish, which is good. Press releases, we make it a habit now of doing that as well. And we're going to have a feature going on the top of our website soon that translates the entire web page as well. It's a pretty easy Google Translate widget that we're going to add on. So.
Thank you. Are there any additional member comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hemphill, for your presentations.
Thank you.
Are there any public comments here in San Marcos on agenda items 9A or 9B? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment on our administrative activity report and our communications and outreach report.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on either of the reports, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand, or you may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. As an additional point of information for WebEx users, we pasted the link to the video in the chat feature if you'd like to click through. Are there any comments on these two reports? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're moving on to agenda item 10, report on the Enforcement Advisory Committee, the Qualifications Committee, and the Peer Review Oversight Committee. We only have the Peer Review Oversight Committee report today. We don't have either of the Enforcement Advisory or the Qualifications Committee reports, so we'll be starting off with item 10C. And we have our chair via WebEx to give that presentation for the Peer Review Oversight Committee, Ms. Laura Ross.
Good morning. Is my audio okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Quiet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning. Ms. Lada, members of the board, I am Laura Ross, chair of the CBA's Peer Review Oversight Committee. The PROC held its meeting at the CBA headquarters and via WebEx on August 9th. I would like to thank CBA liaison Tony Lynn for attending our meeting and providing an overview of the CBA's activities from the May and July CBA meetings. The PROC approved its May 10th, 2024 meeting minutes and the proposed 2025 PROC meeting dates, which I will present in the next item. PROC members attended 8 report acceptance body meetings, otherwise known as RABs, since our last PROC meeting. The PROC members reported that the report acceptance body meetings met all expectations. PROC members also reviewed 2 out-of-state administering entities, the Nevada Society of CPAs and the New Jersey Society of CPAs. It was determined that the Nevada Society of CPAs and the New Jersey Society of CPAs complied with the administrative procedures and standards in all material respects as established by the CBA. Lastly, the PROC reviewed and discussed the report on the AICPA peer review annual report on oversight and peer review statistical data provided by AICPA. The next PROC meeting will be held on December 13th, 2024. Ms. Lotta, that concludes my update. Would you like me to continue with item XC2?
Yes, please continue.
For item 10C2, the PROC members approved the proposed 2025 PROC meeting dates at its August 9th meeting. The PROC recommends that the CBA adopt or modify the proposed 2025 PROC meeting dates. That concludes my presentation, and I will now turn it back over to Ms. Lotta, and I'm happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Do we have any board questions or comments about the peer review oversight committee report or the meeting dates? Seeing none, do I have a motion from the board members to approve the 2025 peer review oversight committee meeting dates? Mr. Aguilera?
I move that we accept the meeting dates proposed.
Do I have a second? Ms. Ward? Okay. Any additional member comments or questions? Seeing none, are there any public comments here in San Marcos on this item? Seeing none, moderator, please open Q&A for public comment on agenda item 10C1 and 2.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on the PROC reports, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that. Type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hands. Each speaker will have 5 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments? And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Ms. Reed, please take the vote.
Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
Teresa Thompson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Tony Lynn?
Yes.
Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Philheim?
Yes.
Nancy Dawn?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Patricia Batchelor?
Yes.
Doug Aguilar?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Okay, next we have agenda item 11, the report of the licensing chief, which will be given by Jennifer Huddy, our manager of the licensing unit. Please proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Lotta. My name is Jennifer Huddy, and I'm the manager of the initial licensing unit. This licensing activity report, or LAR, covers July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. The LAR begins with the reporting of processing times. I'm pleased to report that the processing times remain below 30 days. The NASBA CPA exam performance summary for the first and second testing quarters of 2024 are attached. The number of first-time testers decreased by 24% for California and 34% nationally compared to the same period in 2023. A decrease in first-time testers is common after the implementation of a new exam version. The overall pass rates for California remain consistent to the national pass rates with a slight difference of 3%. On to pages 3 and 4. As of June 30th, 2024, the examination unit has approved over 5,000 first-time applicants to sit for the CPA exam. The initial licensing unit has approved approximately 3,300 applications for CPAs and firms. On pages 5 and 6, data related to renewal statistics, renewal deficiencies, and continuing education audits are displayed. Table 7 includes CE audit data. As of June 30th, 2024, the renewal unit had performed 899 audits. Of the 899, 739 were found to be compliant. 59 were initially deficient, but are now compliant. That concludes my presentation. I'll now turn it back over to Ms. Lotta, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Huddy. Do we have any questions or comments from the board members? Ms. Dong?
When do you anticipate the test rates to pick up? I understand it's down 23 to 30%. Seems like a pretty big drop.
Ms. Center?
We don't have an estimated date on where we would see those differences in terms of the pass rate adjustments. Some of that probably has nothing to do with curriculum and not being caught up. It just has to do with individuals potentially rushing in and taking the test before it ends. But we do know that there were some curriculum changes because of CPA evolution in our colleges. Hopefully those will trickle down also over time, and that will also impact the pass rates.
Not just the pass rates. I think it was the first-time test takers. I think that dropped about 23%.
Yeah, that is completely normal, and you should start seeing that change like next year. When you compare the quarter, yeah, that's completely predictable.
Okay, so it's within expectations for it to drop by 25%. Okay.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the board? Seeing none, any public comments here in San Marcos on this item? Seeing none, moderator, please open the Q&A for public comment on agenda item 11A.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a public comment, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on this item? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that item?
Yes, please close the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 12, report of the enforcement chief, which will be given by Ms. Carrie O'Connor, our chief of the enforcement division. Please proceed.
Good morning. I'm Carrie O'Connor, the chief of the enforcement division. The activity report before you today is for the full fiscal year 2023-24. You will see that compared with the prior fiscal year, we have received 27% more complaints. And on page 2, we have included information on the top 3 complaint types, with complaints regarding unlicensed activity being the most common type. Moving on to the investigations and investigations pending, on page 3, staff closed over 6,300 cases with 96% closed within 1 year. And the average days to close investigations was 106 days. Enforcement had almost 1,600 cases in its pending investigations inventory, not history. And there were 2 pending cases over 24 months. And since this report, both of those cases have been closed. Discipline-related information can be found on page 4. Looking at the AG referrals, the CBA referred 46 matters to the AG and filed 27 pleadings. The CBA had 40 matters pending at the AG's office. And lastly, the CBA has taken disciplinary action on 36 final disciplinary orders. You'll find information regarding citations and fines on page 5. The CBA issued nearly 1,100 citations. 85% of those citations were due to failing to comply with the 2012 continuing education requirement. We received 116 citation and fine appeals and have withdrawn or modified 65 citations based on those appeals. Page 6 contains information regarding unlicensed activities. We received just over 2,400 complaints regarding unlicensed activity, and we closed 3,200 investigations for the full fiscal year, with the majority closed as a result of compliance. The last area I'd like to highlight is on page 7, and it's related to probation monitoring. We had 63 licensees on probation at the end of the fiscal year, and we identified 44 probation violations, with the majority being failure to submit the written quarterly probation reports.
At this time, I'd like to turn discussion on this item over to Secretary Treasurer Lotta and be happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor, for that presentation. Do we have any questions or comments from the board members on this item? Seeing none, oh, sorry, Ms. Hines.
On the unlicensed activity, complaints received, and then also the complaint category, there's a good little jump in the numbers of complaints that have been received and in those categories of practice without a permit and individuals without a CPA license. It may be too soon for you to have an answer to this, but have you seen any trends, or is there anything that y'all are following about those increases?
It would be too early to tell that trend right now. I can say that we did receive large majority of complaints for this category just right before the fiscal year end closed. So it may,
it wasn't like an upward trend. It's like you got a whole bunch recently. Okay. All right. So we can expect that maybe in a future meeting, y'all will have some report back on maybe what those look like, or whether you saw any.
Right. I can't. I can't predict a trend, but if when we see it in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Any additional questions or comments from members? Seeing none, are there any public comments here in San Marcos on the report of the enforcement chief? Seeing none, moderator, please open Q&A for public comment on agenda item 12.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on the enforcement report, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. Or our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on the enforcement report? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 13, the meeting minutes. So we'll start off with 13A, adoption of the July 25th and 26th, 2024 California Board of Accountancy meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to adopt the minutes of this meeting, specifically agenda item 13A, which includes non-substantive edits that were noted after the materials were received? Ms. Thompson?
I move to adopt the meeting minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I'll do Ms. Hines.
I'll second. Thank you.
Okay. You can hear Mr. Aguilera. Yeah. Okay, any additional member comments or questions? Seeing none, are there any public comments here in San Marcos on these meeting minutes? Seeing none, moderator, please open Q&A for public comment on agenda item 13A.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on the agenda item, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our calling users may press *3 to raise their hands. Any comments on the July 25th, 26 minutes? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that portion for now?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Ms. Reed, please take a vote.
Doug Aguilar,
Yes.
Patricia Batchelor,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Abstain.
Nancy Dong,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Christian Lotta,
Yes.
Tony Lynn,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Teresa Thompson,
Yes.
and Evangeline Ward. The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Continuing on to agenda item 13B, can I get a motion to accept this item for the Peer Review Oversight Committee meeting minutes, which includes non-substantive edits that were noted after the materials were received for the May 10th, 2024 meeting? Ms. Hines?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Thompson? Thank you. Any additional member comments or questions on these minutes? Seeing none, any comments here in San Marcos of the public for these minutes? Seeing none, moderator, please open Q&A for public comment on agenda item 13B.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on the minutes for the May 10th PROC meeting, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that. Type the word comment in the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on the PROC minutes? I do not see any request for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Reed, please take a vote.
Evangeline Ward,
Yes.
Teresa Thompson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Tony Lynn, Christian Lotta,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hine,
Yes.
Nancy Dawn,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Patricia Bachelor,
Yes.
and Doug Aguilera,
Yes.
and the motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Okay, continuing on to agenda item number 14, other business, which includes any reports in regards to AICPA or NASBA. We will be taking, going through all of these items, and we'll take public comment at the conclusion of all of the items included in 14. So I will start off with agenda item A, AICPA reporting, and we'll kick that off to Ms. Katrina Salazar in regards to the Board of Examiners report and anything else she would like to address for the AICPA item.
Thank you very much for that. For the Board of Examiners report, I think it would be helpful to share some information about how the exam is administered, and it may actually shed some light upon how things could change in terms of folks taking exams. But I want to share some good news, and that is that in 2025, the CPA examination, the administration will shift from a windowed examination for the course sections to continuous testing. So again, in this year, it changed because of the implementation. So I think this is great news, that means that the core exam sections in 2025 are going to be available with no downtime. Candidates may retake the failed section in the same quarter, and there will be 4 score release dates in the 25 Q1 score release schedule. So good news for availability of examination. So again, I think everybody knew going into a new exam that there would be some temporary changes as everything was being worked through. So this was all planned, all expected, but the good news is on the horizon. I'd also like to share that the discipline sections will be administered in the first month of each quarter during 2025. So that windowed process will continue in 2025. But there is also good news in that candidates will also be able to take a discipline section in June 2025. And that is a one-time additional window that is being opened to accommodate the extensions that were granted to candidates who had existing credits that were extended and will now expire on June 30th of 2025. So some good news, I think, for candidates as they look to utilize those extensions and hopefully, complete the examination portion of their licensure requirements. So hopefully that will be helpful and will be good news for next year. I would also share that the BOE continues to meet regularly, and at the last meeting there was a blueprint review where there is a review of the subcommittee processes and updates. And it's important for this board to know that there continues to be robust oversight and administration of the examination. And so for our newer board members, there are what's called a practice analysis that happens every set number of years or every so many years, but between there's an ongoing review to make sure that the material is current and appropriate and things aren't becoming obsolescent as rules change. So I just wanted to report that continues, and that concludes my BOE comments.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar. And as we don't have any AICPA report for the State Board Committee, that concludes our agenda item 14A, and we'll continue to take comments after B is presented. So moving on to agenda item 14B, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, and we'll start with B1, which is the report of the NASBA Director at Large, which is also Ms. Katrina Salazar.
Thank you for that. We have addressed sort of by reference some of the more recent NASBA communications. I would like to share that the proposed additional pathway to CPA licensure item that was mentioned in our earlier agenda item is currently available on the NASBA website. For those that would like to look at it, as is a recent communication on mobility that came out. I did also want to share with the board that NASBA in early August did issue a letter to the PCAOB on the proposed auditing standard called Designing and Performing Substantive Analytical Procedures and Amendments to Other PCAOB Standards. So again, that process continues. That information is available on the NASBA website for anyone that has interest. And I just on background would share with you that, it's interesting, and some of the comments that were put forth really we're looking at how substantive analytical procedures are defined and how AI is changing it, and whether or not in the future hybrid procedures may be considered. So there's a lot there's a lot of thoughtful responses. So I would encourage boards to look at it. Again, often things may happen at PCAOB and then later become applicable to an even wider range of standards. So again, there's some really great questions and thoughtful commentary. So I'd encourage you to just sort of add that into your research as things you look at doing. And that concludes my report from NASBA.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar. So we will continue on to agenda item 14B, 2 and 3, which will be presented by our Pacific Regional Director of NASBA, Ms. Nancy Corrigan.
Thank you, Ms. Lotta. Yes, and I'm going to actually jump to 3B, Relations with Member Boards Committee, because prior to having any of the regional meetings, that committee meets and discusses and decides what the questions will be to discuss with the various jurisdictions. That meeting happened on August 12th. So the regional directors get together and kind of decide what the agenda should be, and then all 8 regions will hold their meetings. And so the Pacific region met via Zoom on September 10th, and we had participation from Mr. Frenzella and, of course, others in the region. What we always do there is we have kind of introductions, do board highlights, board meeting highlights, which we did, and then we ask the jurisdictions what one significant issue in their jurisdiction is. And it's hard for them to focus on one because all boards have lots of issues. So, but we do give them that opportunity to express something. And then moving on, what we call focus questions, we wanted to know what their boards had been hearing or dealing with when it comes to the private equity issue. And pointing out that on August 8th, NASBA had presented a private equity webinar, and whether they had any comments or facing anything this time. And actually, most are not experiencing anything yet with that as far as private equity ownership of firms and how that practice affects, licensing and enforcement and such issues. So then we moved on and talked about the AICPA's National Pipeline Advisory Group, or NPAG, report that had been issued a few weeks prior to our meeting. A number of recommendations in that report had been made on how boards can participate on helping alleviate pipeline issues, which are so pertinent these days, of course. One was early testing before having a degree, and some thought that made sense. Some are already doing it, and some jurisdictions are willing to consider it. Another one was centralized exam data to assist in targeting all candidates in the pipeline with consistent and timely messages and reminders about, signing up, registering for the exam, and that sort of thing. A concern there would be, well, who owns that data? Authorization to use that information and to reach out to the candidates. So that was some pretty healthy discussion there as well. And a third one, allowing accounting review courses to count towards educational credit and, for licensing. And some are saying a few do already do that, and others, we'll think about it, I think, in the future and see how that goes. So we wanted their thoughts on those topics. And of course, the big issue for that meeting was NASBA held regional forums on August 22nd and 23rd, which some of us did attend, were able to do that, talking about their professional licensor task force and the successes there. Mr. Franzella mentioned earlier, I think 2 days later, the exposure draft CPA competency-based experience pathway was released, except that NASBA board members had received it. So our chair, Stephanie Saunders of NASBA, discussed that a bit and how receptive my jurisdiction anyway is with that proposal, whether they supported the additional pathway, the context surrounding the one-year experience program, and additional information needed. The group was actually pretty quiet about it because I think the smaller jurisdictions are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen and what's going to fall out from all of this. A lot of progress still needs to happen and take place. We don't have all the answers from anybody, AICP or NASBA, just yet. And so that was kind of that discussion there. So other than that, and telling them to watch for the UAA exposure draft that should be coming out. I just reminded them that NASBA's annual meeting is in Orlando, Florida this year, October 27th through the 30th, and that scholarships are available if they needed them. So that concludes that part of my report. I'll go ahead and continue on. All right, thank you. So then on 3A, which is the Enforcement Resources Committee, we had our first in-person meeting on August 14th in Nashville, and we made it an all-day, working day meeting is what that was of all the members. We had one of the NASBA presenters discuss the National Registry for CPE sponsors, how they qualify to be on it, how they maintain membership to present qualifying continuing education that qualifies for licensure renewal. And so it was interesting for those that were new to that to hear about it. It is rather stringent, and I can tell you those sponsors really don't want to lose their place on that list. They do everything they can do to be in compliance, which is very important. We also had a speaker who is the director of compliance talking about the status of the accountancy licensee database and linking the ALD accountancy licensee database with the gateway system to enhance the information process and to make exam scores more accessible and move away from linking the information with names, dates of birth, and digits of Social Security numbers. So another way to link information without exposing individuals with all their personal information. So that's kind of a work that's in progress. We then had a review of the Department of Labor Audit Deficiencies Initiative. The DOL had presented NASBA with a summary, and I think it went back to 2016 of various by states and the types of audit issues that they were finding. And so this committee was trying to think about what's the best way to kind of summarize and put that information out to the jurisdiction so that they kind of know, so how to best communicate and get referral feedback. I must say that over the years, communication with the DOL has not been that open or that flexible, and I believe that it will become more so because there's kind of a joint benefit in communicating and trying to resolve issues that have been occurring in these audits. So, final comment is that this committee is working on some enforcement webinar training series, and we're trying to identify topics that could be presented, like, for example, in late October, early November, for example, how AI could impact enforcement issues, and for investigations, presenting just some of the recent cases that are occurring without being specific, but the nature of some things that are going on in the profession. And a third one might be how smaller boards are encountering and dealing with investigations versus what larger boards encounter. So some interesting things that will be coming that should be beneficial to all around. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corrigan. So that concludes our item number 14, as we don't have a legislative support committee report from NASBA today. So now I will open it up to member comments and questions in relation to any of the reports we just heard regarding AICPA or NASBA. Okay, seeing none, are there any public comments here in San Marcos on reports for AICPA or NASBA under agenda item 14? Seeing none, moderator, please open up Q&A for public comment on agenda item 14.
This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make any comments on the agenda item, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hands. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on this agenda item? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Okay, it looks like we finally made it to agenda item 15, closing business. Item 15A is for agenda items for future California Board of Accountancy meetings. Are there any agenda items from members? Seeing none, are there any public comments here for future agenda items in San Marcos? Seeing none, moderator, please open up Q&A for public comment on agenda item 15A.
This is the moderator. We've opened the public comment features for suggestions about future agenda items. If you'd like to suggest a concept, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hands. Are there any suggestions for future agenda topics? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Okay, and that concludes our September 20th California Board of Accountancy meeting. We're adjourned.